Hey guys, tonight we're stepping through a portal in time. Not to a grand battlefield or a bustling market, but into the hushed, almost mythical halls of the Ottoman Topkapi Palace. Imagine for a moment that you are not just a listener, but a silent observer, shadow trailing through corridors where secrets cling to the ornate tapestries and whispers echo from centuries past. You'll navigate the labyrinthine passages, catch glimpses of extraordinary lives, and perhaps, if you're very still, even feel the weight of power and loneliness that resided within those ancient stones. Tonight, we're peeling back the layers on a truly unique and often misunderstood aspect of imperial life, the curious, complex, and sometimes utterly bizarre job of the Ottoman palace eunuchs. These weren't just servants. They were guardians, administrators, confidants, and sometimes formidable powers in their own right, operating in a world utterly alien to our own. We'll soon discover that surviving a day in their shoes would require a level of political savvy and emotional resilience you probably didn't know existed. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, if you're listening from afar, drop your location and local time in the comments. It's always fascinating to see how far these sleepy history tales travel. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You find yourself standing at the grand, imposing gates of Topkapi Palace in Istanbul, the twilight painting the sky in shades of bruised purple and fiery orange. The air, even after centuries, seems to hum with the ghosts of sultans, concubines, viziers, and of course, the eunuchs whose lives we're about to explore. This isn't just a building, it's a universe, a miniature city within a city, designed not just for royal living, but for the meticulous execution of absolute power. As you approach, the massive iron-bound doors seem to loom over you, hinting at the hidden worlds within. You hear the distant calls of muezzins from minarets, a timeless sound that would have serenaded sultans to sleep for generations. The palace, especially at this hour, feels less like a museum and more like a slumbering beast. Its secrets held tight within its ancient walls. The first thing that strikes you is the sheer scale. Topkapi isn't a single monolithic structure, but a sprawling complex of courtyards, pavilions, gardens, and service buildings, each serving a specific purpose in the intricate machinery of the Ottoman Empire. For over 4 centuries, from the mid-15th to the early 20th century, this was the heart of an empire that stretched across 3 continents. Imagine the sheer logistics of running such a place, housing thousands of people, from the Sultan himself to the lowliest kitchen staff, and at the very core of this meticulously ordered universe were the eunuchs, the silent pillars of its administration and security. As you slip past the outer gates, perhaps you're a specially invited guest, or maybe just a particularly stealthy historical voyeur. You immediately sense a shift in atmosphere. The public clamor of Istanbul fades, replaced by a profound, almost reverent quiet. The outer courtyards are vast, designed to impress and intimidate, but as you move deeper, the spaces become more intimate, more enclosed, leading you towards the most restricted areas. This journey inward mirrors the life of a eunuch, who, once admitted to the palace, would rarely, if ever, leave its confines. Their world became the palace, their family its inhabitants, their purpose its smooth operation. You can almost feel the weight of expectation on them. They were expected to be utterly loyal, completely discreet, and astonishingly efficient. For many, their very survival depended on these qualities. You might wonder, as historians still argue whether their influence was truly for the good of the empire or merely for their own gain. What drove them? Was it ambition, a desperate need for security, or a genuine devotion to the Sultan and his dynasty? Perhaps a complex cocktail of all 3. They navigated a world where a single misstep could mean disgrace, torture, or even death. A high-stakes environment where every word and gesture was scrutinized. It's enough to make your modern-day office politics look like a kindergarten. Playdate. Think of the sheer psychological fortitude required. You, if placed in their shoes, would be stripped of your external identity, your past, and in many cases, your very masculinity. Your new identity would be entirely defined by your role within the palace walls. It's a bit like joining an ultra-exclusive super-secret society where the initiation fee is, well, rather steep. Once you're in, there's no going back. This profound transformation set them apart, marking them as neither fully male nor fully female, occupying a liminal space that afforded them unique privileges but also imposed severe limitations. This curious status was, in fact, the very foundation of their utility to the Sultan. As you mentally prepare to delve further, you notice the intricate tile work shimmering under the artificial lights, the echoes of your own footsteps, the only sound breaking the silence. This grand entrance isn't just an architectural marvel, it's a symbolic threshold. Beyond these gates lies a world where the rules of gender and power were reimagined, where men who were not men held sway over thousands, and where the most intimate corners of the empire were managed by those who could never claim an heir. It's a fascinating, unsettling, and utterly captivating aspect of history, one that deserves to be explored with a quiet reverence for the lives lived within these magnificent, formidable walls. You're about to discover how these individuals, often starting from humble or tragic beginnings, rose to positions of extraordinary, albeit peculiar power. As you continue your silent journey deeper into Topkapi Palace, you find yourself drawn towards the heart of its most guarded secrets, the harem. The very word conjures images of mystery, intrigue, and forbidden luxury, and indeed it was all of those things and more. Stepping through the veiled entrance, you immediately notice the air changing again. It's softer, perhaps a little warmer, filled with the faint scent of rosewater and exotic spices. This isn't just a part of the palace. It's a world unto itself, a private domain where the Sultan's family, his concubines, and their attendants lived. And who better to guard this profoundly private space than those who were themselves outside the conventional bounds of society? The harem, or harem-i-huma, as it was formerly known, meaning imperial harem, was far more than just a place. For the Sultan's pleasure, it was a vast and complex social structure, a highly organized community with its own strict hierarchies, rules, and daily rhythms. Here lived the valid Sultan, the Sultan's mother, who was often the most powerful woman in the empire, wielding immense influence over her son, and by extension, the state. Then there were the Sultan's wives and concubines, known as Kaden and Iqbal, vying for his attention and the prospect of bearing an heir. Below them were numerous female servants, slave girls, and children, all living within these cloistered walls. It was a microcosm of the empire, ruled by its own internal dynamics. And the eunuchs were its linchpin. Imagine the atmosphere. It's a blend of opulent beauty, intricate Iznik tiles covering the walls, ceilings adorned with delicate floral patterns, light filtering through stained glass windows, and a pervasive sense of enclosure. You can almost hear the rustle of silk gowns, the quiet laughter of children, and the soft murmurs of women conversing. Yet beneath this surface calm, there was a constant undercurrent of ambition, rivalry, and sometimes desperate loneliness. For many of the women brought from distant lands, this was their entire world, and their status within it depended entirely on the Sultan's favor. It was a golden cage, perhaps, but a cage nonetheless. And it was the eunuchs, specifically the chief black eunuch, the Kisler Akask, who held the keys to this cage, both literally and metaphorically. Their unique status as non-males made them ideal guardians for the harem, as they posed no threat to the Sultan's exclusive access to the women. This was a mainstream historical fact. Their physical alteration was seen as the ultimate guarantee of their loyalty and impartiality in matters of the harem, ensuring the purity of the royal lineage. It's a pragmatic, if brutal, solution to a very specific royal problem. You might think of them merely as guards, but their duties extended far beyond standing watch. They were the harem's administrators, responsible for its daily operations. From managing the vast quantities of food and supplies, to overseeing the education and training of the concubines and slave girls, they were also the primary intermediaries between the harem and the outside world, conveying messages, requests, and sometimes political intrigue from the valid sultan or other powerful women to the sultan and his ministers. This meant they were privy to the deepest secrets of the empire, secrets that, if leaked, could shake the foundations of power. A quirky tidbit, the valid sultan in particular, relied heavily on her chief black eunuch, often entrusting him with her personal finances, her charitable foundations, and even her political maneuvering. He was her eyes, ears, and often her voice outside the harem. This made the position of Kisler Akask one of the most powerful in the entire Ottoman administration, often outranking even the Grand Vizier in terms of direct access to the Sultan and his mother. Historians still argue whether this immense power was primarily used for self-enrichment, or genuinely for the stability of the dynasty. Perhaps it was a bit of both, a convenient synergy of personal gain and imperial service. As you mentally observe a scene within the harem, perhaps a group of concubines practicing music, their delicate stringed instruments echoing softly, overseen by a watchful, silent eunuch, you realize the profound impact these individuals had. They were the silent cogs in the machinery of one of the world's greatest empires, ensuring its continued operation from its most intimate, vulnerable core. Their lives were defined by service and sacrifice, often beginning with involuntary circumstances, but frequently culminating in positions of unimaginable influence. It's a peculiar irony. Those who were castrated to make them safe became some of the most formidable figures in the entire Ottoman court. You've now glimpsed the intimate, guarded world of the harem, and it's here that the story of the eunuchs truly begins to bifurcate. While the previous section touched upon the chief black eunuch, it's crucial to understand the distinct origins and roles of the two primary groups, the black eunuchs and the white eunuchs. We'll start with the black eunuchs, whose presence was intimately tied to the harem's very existence. Imagine them arriving, often at a young age, from distant lands, their lives irrevocably altered by circumstances far beyond their control. Their journey to Topkapi Palace was one of profound transformation, both physical and social. The vast majority of the black eunuchs in the Ottoman Empire were of African origin, primarily from regions like Sudan, Abyssinia, modern-day Ethiopia. In other parts of Northeast Africa, they were typically acquired through various means, including slave markets, gifts from local rulers, or through warfare. This was a mainstream historical fact. The demand for eunuchs in Islamic courts, not just Ottoman, created a gruesome but thriving trade network that stretched across the African continent and into the Middle East. It's a sobering thought, isn't it, to consider the human cost behind the opulent walls of an empire? Their journey to Istanbul would have been arduous and terrifying, often involving long treks across deserts or sea voyages. Upon arrival, they would undergo the ultimate, brutal alteration that defined their future status: castration. This procedure, performed in specific centers outside the Ottoman Empire as Islamic law generally prohibited it within Ottoman lands, was incredibly dangerous, with a high mortality rate. If you imagine yourself as a young boy, suddenly separated from everything familiar, then subjected to such a horrific ordeal, you begin to grasp the sheer trauma that underpinned their existence. Survival meant entering a new, strange world, but also a chance at a life. However circumscribed, that might be better than what they left behind. Once they survived the procedure and recovered, they would be brought to the palace, often entering a system designed to strip away their former identities and reshape them into loyal servants of the Sultan. They were often given new names, taught Turkish, and indoctrinated into the strict protocols of palace life. This process of re-education and re-socialization was thorough, aimed at ensuring their absolute devotion to the Ottoman dynasty. It's a bit like a medieval high-stakes boarding school, except with significantly more at stake than just good grades. A quirky tidbit that demonstrates their eventual integration: many black eunuchs became devout Muslims. performing the Hajj pilgrimage to Mecca multiple times, and establishing WKF's charitable endowments for mosques, schools, and public fountains. This showed their deep commitment not just to the palace, but to their adopted faith and society, demonstrating a profound spiritual life alongside their secular duties. They often amassed considerable personal wealth through gifts and various administrative roles, which they then used for philanthropic endeavors. Their specific role within the palace, especially after the 16th century, became increasingly focused on the harem. As we discussed, their physical condition made them ideal guardians of the sultan's private quarters, ensuring the purity of the royal lineage and acting as intermediaries. For the women within, the chief black eunuch, the Kisler-Akosk, literally master of the girls, eventually became one of the most powerful figures in the entire empire, controlling access to the harem and, by extension, the sultan's mother and wives. Historians still argue whether the extreme power of the chief black eunuch ultimately contributed to the weakening of the sultan's direct authority by creating an alternative power center, or if it merely provided a necessary layer of stability and governance for the harem. You see them in your mind's eye, moving with a quiet dignity through the opulent corridors, their dark faces often contrasting with their elaborate robes of indigo, saffron, or teal. They are watchful, ever present, their eyes missing nothing. They are the unseen hands that kept the gears of the harem turning, managing everything from finances to discipline, education, and even the selection of future concubines. Their lives were defined by paradox, physically diminished, yet socially elevated, enslaved, yet wielding immense power. Cut off from personal lineage, yet safeguarding the dynasty's future. It's a role that continues to fascinate and disturb, a testament to the complex and often brutal realities of imperial power. Having explored the world of the black eunuchs, it's primarily tied to the harem, your journey through Topkapi now leads you to another distinct group, the white eunuchs. While sharing the fundamental characteristic of castration, their origins, roles, and spheres of influence within the Ottoman palace were markedly different. Imagine transitioning from the soft, veiled world of the harem to the more austere, formal environment of the outer palace courts, where state affairs were conducted. Here you'd find the white eunuchs, often overseeing the sultan's personal treasury, managing the Ender-Yun school, and acting as royal pages and chamberlains. The white eunuchs, unlike their African counterparts, were predominantly of European or Caucasian origin, often captured during warfare or purchased from slave markets in the Balkans, the Caucasus, or Eastern Europe. This was a mainstream historical fact. They were typically Slavs, Circassians, Georgians, or Hungarians, among others. Their castration was also performed outside Ottoman lands, the same religious reasons before they entered imperial service. The age at which they were castrated could vary, but many were boys, ensuring they would grow up knowing no other life than service to the sultan. Upon their arrival at the palace, these young white eunuchs were usually admitted into the Ender-Yun school, Ender-Yun, Humayun, the inner palace school. Yes, this was not just a school. It was a highly elite, rigorous institution designed to train future administrators, military leaders, and palace officials. It's important to understand that many of the most capable and intelligent boys from across the empire, and even beyond, were brought into the Ender-Yun system. It was a meritocracy within the confines of a strict hierarchy, and the white eunuchs were an integral part of it. This was where you'd learn the intricate dance of court politics, the nuances of Persian and Arabic, and the art of calligraphy. Think of it as an ancient, highly exclusive management training program, with real-world consequences if you failed. Their roles focused largely on the outer sections of the palace. Outside the immediate harem walls, serving the sultan directly, in his private apartments, in public audiences, they managed the royal treasury, maintained the sultan's robes and jewels, attended to his personal needs, and acted as highly trusted messengers. Unlike the black eunuchs, who focused on the inner sanctum of family, the white eunuchs were the eyes and ears of the sultan in the administrative heart of the empire. They were, in essence, the sultan's personal staff, secretaries, and confidants, Given the unique trust that came with their perceived lack of familial ambition, a quirky tidbit, the white eunuchs, particularly the chief white eunuch, the Kapi, a Kosk, or master of the gate, held significant power in the earlier centuries of the Ottoman Empire, often controlling access to the Sultan's presence and thus influencing state appointments and decisions. Before the rise of the chief black eunuch's power, the Kapi Kosk was arguably the most influential eunuch in the palace. Historians still argue whether the shift in power from the white eunuchs to the black eunuchs was a deliberate policy, to consolidate harem power, or simply an organic evolution as the valid sultan's influence grew over time. It's one of those delightful historical chicken or egg scenarios. You might visualize a white eunuch, perhaps in crisp white or pale saffron robes, moving silently through the Divan-i-Human Imperial Council chamber, delivering a message from the Sultan to his Grand Vizier. Their demeanor would be composed, their movements precise, embodying the efficiency and discretion expected of them.
Wow.
They were often highly educated, cultured individuals, capable of engaging in intellectual discourse as well as managing complex administrative tasks. Their lives, while still marked by the loss of their masculine identity, offered a different path to influence and prestige compared to the black eunuchs. They lived in separate quarters within the palace, maintaining their own hierarchy and routines. While their lives were devoted to service, they also found camaraderie within their ranks, forming close bonds with one another. Their existence highlights the Ottoman state's pragmatic approach to governance. If a particular physical alteration provided an advantage in securing loyalty and efficiency, then it was utilized, regardless of the personal cost to the individuals involved. This system, though alien to modern sensibilities, was seen as essential for maintaining order and absolute control in a vast, complex imperial court. You continue to observe a quiet witness to the peculiar world these men inhabited, a world built on both opulence and profound human sacrifice. Now that you understand the distinct origins and primary domains of the black and white eunuchs, it's time to delve into the intricate hierarchy of service that defined their lives within the Ottoman palace. This wasn't a flat organization. It was a rigidly structured pyramid, with every eunuch knowing their place, their duties, and their potential for advancement. Imagine a colossal living org chart, where movement up the ranks meant more power, more prestige, and sometimes more danger. At the very apex of the eunuch hierarchy were the two most powerful figures, the chief black eunuch Kisler Kosk and the chief white eunuch Kapi Kosk. As we've seen, their influence ebbed and flowed over the centuries. In the early Ottoman period, the white eunuchs, through the Kapi Kosk, held significant sway over the Sultan's private apartments and the state administration. However, by the 17th century, the chief black eunuch, his unparalleled access to the harem, and thus to the valid Sultan, the Queen Mother, eclipsed the white eunuch in terms of direct political power and personal wealth. This was a mainstream historical fact. The Kisler Kosk became one of the three most powerful figures in the empire, often ranking just below the Grand Vizier and the Al-Islam chief, Islamic scholar. This shift marked a significant evolution in Ottoman court politics. Below these two paramount figures were various ranks of eunuchs, each with specific duties and privileges. For the black eunuchs in the harem, you'd find titles like harem, a Kosk harem master, Hazen Adar, a Kosk treasurer of the harem, and Vekelhark steward. These individuals were responsible for managing the daily operations of the harem, from financial accounts and personnel management to ensuring the women's well-being and education. They supervised a vast retinue of female servants and slave girls, ensuring that the complex machinery of the harem ran smoothly. Think of them as high-level department managers, but for a royal household of thousands, where discretion was paramount. The white eunuchs, on the other hand, had their own distinct set of ranks and responsibilities within the outer palace. Under the Kapi Kosk, you would find officials like the Hazina Darbaji, chief treasurer of the imperial treasury, managed the Sultan's personal wealth and the palace finances, and the Killer Zabaka chief of the pantry, who oversaw the Sultan's food and provisions. There were also numerous Hazo-Dalila chamberlains of the privy chamber, who attended directly to the Sultan's personal needs, dressed him, served him meals, and were privy to his most private moments and thoughts. These were essentially the Sultan's executive assistants, granted immense trust due to their constant proximity and intimate knowledge. A quirky tidbit: the eunuchs, particularly those in higher ranks, would often adopt younger eunuchs as their sons or protégés, guiding them through the intricacies of palace life and helping them ascend the ranks. This created a powerful system of patronage and loyalty within the eunuch corps, kind of artificial family structure within the palace. Walls. Historians still argue whether this patronage system was primarily a means for individual eunuchs to build power bases, or if it was a necessary mechanism for institutional continuity and skill transfer within a system that lacked natural generational succession. Perhaps like many things in history, it was a practical blend of both. You can imagine a young, newly arrived eunuch, perhaps overwhelmed and disoriented, being taken under the wing of an older, more seasoned figure. He would learn the strict court etiquette, the proper way to address different ranks, the subtle signals of power and displeasure. He'd discover the palace's countless secrets, both mundane and scandalous. Promotion would depend not just on intelligence and efficiency, but also on discretion, loyalty, and the ability to navigate complex political currents without drawing undue attention. One wrong word, one moment of disloyalty, and a promising career could evaporate, leading to demotion, exile, or worse. It's enough to make you appreciate the simpler hierarchy of your own workplace. So, as you mentally observe this elaborate system, you see a living, breathing testament to the Ottoman state's administrative genius and its peculiar approach to power. The eunuchs, despite their physical lack, became indispensable components of this machine. Their unique status, allowing them to transcend traditional social boundaries and fill roles that required absolute trustworthiness. Their hierarchy was a reflection of the empire's meticulous organization, system designed to ensure loyalty, efficiency, and the complete control of the Sultan. Over his vast domain, you've navigated the different types of eunuchs and their complex hierarchy. Now, let's zoom in on what truly transformed these individuals. Often acquired through unfortunate circumstances, into indispensable palace officials, their education and training. This wasn't merely about basic literacy, it was a comprehensive, lifelong curriculum designed to mold them into highly skilled, loyal, and cultured servants of the Ottoman state. Imagine yourself, a young boy, thrust into this rigorous system, your every waking hour dedicated to learning, observing, and adapting. For many white eunuchs, as we briefly touched upon, the foundation of their education was the Enderun school. Within Topkapi Palace, this was a unique institution, often described as one of the world's first and most successful meritocratic academies. It wasn't just for eunuchs. It also trained the Devir May Christian boys levied from the Balkans who converted to Islam, who would go on to become some of the empire's most brilliant viziers, generals, and governors. This was a mainstream historical fact. The Enderun system produced a professional bureaucracy and military elite fiercely loyal to the Sultan. They owed their entire existence and status to him. Within the Enderun, young eunuchs received an education that would put many modern boarding schools to shame. They were taught reading and writing in Ottoman, Turkish, Arabic, and Persian, the three key languages of the empire. They studied Islamic theology and law, history and geography. They also received extensive training in practical skills essential for palace administration, calligraphy, a highly prized art form, counting, music, poetry, and even military arts like horsemanship and archery. Beautifully intricate scripts, then immediately transitioning to practicing your swordplay. Talk about a diverse curriculum. For the black eunuchs, particularly those destined for the harem, their training also emphasized discipline, discretion, and a deep understanding of palace protocols. While perhaps not as formally academic as the Enderun, their education was equally critical. You learned the intricacies of harem management, security procedures, and the delicate art of mediating between the valid sultan and her son, or between rival factions within the harem itself. They were taught how to handle sensitive information, how to maintain strict secrecy. and how to carry themselves with the authority and dignity expected of their position. It's like being trained as a high-end personal assistant, security chief, and diplomat, all rolled into one, but with far higher stakes. A quirky tidbit that highlights their practical skills. Some eunuchs became master chefs, responsible for the Sultan's elaborate meals, while others were renowned as gardeners, designing and maintaining the palace's exquisite grounds. Their training was highly practical, directly applicable to the needs of the palace. Historians still argue whether the comprehensive nature of the eunuch's education was a deliberate strategy by the sultans to create a perfectly loyal and capable bureaucracy, free from external family ties, or if it was simply a natural consequence of attracting intelligent individuals and providing them with opportunities within a closed system. It was probably a very efficient, self-serving system, whatever its initial intent. You can picture a young eunuch, perhaps around 10 or 12 years old, sitting cross-legged in a brightly lit courtyard, meticulously copying a Quranic verse in elegant script, his brow furrowed in concentration. Nearby, another might be learning to play the oud, its gentle notes filling the air, or practicing the swift, silent movements required for guarding a royal chamber. Every skill, from the artistic to the martial, was honed to serve the Sultan and the empire. They were taught not to have personal ambitions beyond serving the dynasty, their loyalty reinforced by the fact that the Sultan was their sole benefactor and protector. This extensive education and training transformed individuals, who might otherwise have been marginalized, into highly capable and influential figures. It imbued them with a sense of purpose and belonging, even as it underscored their unique and often tragic status. They were intellectual, administrative, and physical assets, meticulously cultivated to serve the empire's needs. As you continue to observe, you realize that their competence was not accidental. It was the direct result of a systemic approach to human resource development. Ottoman style, centuries before modern HR was even a twinkle in anyone's eye. You've observed their education, but now it's time to truly understand one of their most paramount functions: the guardians of secrecy. In a world where information was power and intrigue lurked in every shadow, the eunuchs were the ultimate custodians of the palaces, and by extension the empire's most sensitive secrets. Imagine the burden of holding such knowledge day in and day out, knowing that a single slip could have catastrophic consequences for yourself and for the dynasty you served. Their role as guardians of secrecy stemmed directly from their unique position within the palace structure. They were granted unparalleled access to both the private world of the Sultan and the harem, and the public administrative spaces. Yet they lacked the traditional family ties or ambitions that might lead others to betray confidences for dynastic gain. This was a mainstream historical fact. Their lack of lineage meant they couldn't establish rival dynasties, making them inherently more trustworthy in the eyes of the Sultan than even his own blood relatives or high-ranking viziers with powerful families. It's a rather pragmatic solution to the problem of loyalty, isn't it? If you can't have heirs, why would you scheme for a throne? The black eunuchs, particularly in the harem, were the impenetrable wall between the secluded women and the outside world. They controlled all communication, both incoming and outgoing. Every letter, every message, every request had to pass through their hands. They scrutinized visitors, managed internal movements, and ensured no unauthorized person could enter the harem's sacred confines. You might envision a chief black eunuch, his face impassive, carefully inspecting a sealed letter from a provincial governor before it reaches the valid sultan, his eyes missing nothing that might suggest a hidden agenda. They were the ultimate gatekeepers, and their vigilance was absolute. Similarly, the white eunuchs, especially those serving directly in the sultan's privy chamber, were privy to the most intimate state secrets. They would overhear conversations, transcribe confidential documents, and witness private meetings between the sultan and his most trusted advisors. They knew the sultan's moods, his preferences, and his secret worries. A quirky tidbit: it was often a eunuch who would prepare the sultan's coffee or bring him his pipe, observing his every gesture and expression, gathering intelligence even in the most mundane moments. Historians still argue whether this constant Proximity to power made them more susceptible to manipulation by various factions, or if their rigorous training and discretion allowed them to remain remarkably neutral observers. It's a fine line to walk, keeping secrets without becoming a pawn in someone else's game. Their training emphasized not just discretion, but silence. They learned to observe, listen, and remember, but rarely to comment or offer unsolicited opinions. Unless directly asked by the Sultan or valid Sultan, their very demeanor exuded an air of quiet authority and impenetrable reserve. Imagine yourself adopting such a persona, where your face is a mask and your words are measured and few. It's an exhausting level of self-control, particularly when surrounded by the gossip and rivalries. Inherent in any court, this role as guardians of secrecy made them invaluable. The Sultan could trust them with his deepest anxieties about state, affairs, or his personal life, knowing that these confidences would remain inviolable. They became conduits for information, often delivering messages that no one else could be trusted with. Navigating the treacherous waters of court politics with a unique blend of neutrality and acute awareness, you picture them gliding through dimly lit corridors, silent as shadows, carrying the weight of empires on their shoulders, their presence a constant reminder that secrets are the currency of power. Their entire existence was a testament to the Ottoman state's absolute insistence on control over information, a precursor to modern intelligence agencies, if you will, but with a decidedly more personal touch. As you continue your deep dive into the fascinating world of Ottoman eunuchs, it's impossible to ignore one of their most intriguing aspects: the power behind the throne that many of them wielded. Far from being mere servants, some eunuchs rose to positions of extraordinary influence, subtly or sometimes not so subtly guiding the reins of power, often dictating policy and even determining the fate of viziers and sultans. Imagine the quiet satisfaction, or perhaps the immense pressure, of knowing your word could shape an empire, all while remaining ostensibly in the background. The most potent example of this power dynamic was, without a doubt, the Chief Black, Eunuchs, a Kosk. His rise to prominence, especially from the 17th century onwards, meant he often became the de facto administrator of the harem, and, critically, the main conduit to the valid sultan, since the valid sultan often held immense sway over her son. The sultan, the Kisler or Kosk, became the gatekeeper to this formidable influence. This was a mainstream historical fact. He could control who saw the valid sultan, what information reached her, and consequently, what advice she gave to the sultan. This indirect but potent control over access made him a formidable player in imperial politics. You can imagine a grand vizier, the sultan's chief minister, waiting impatiently in an antechamber, hoping for a few minutes with the chief black eunuch to plead a case or gain support for a policy. These eunuchs became power brokers, their favors sought by ambitious officials, their displeasure feared. They could facilitate promotions, arrange marriages, influence judicial decisions, and even instigate the dismissal or execution of high-ranking officials. It's a bit like being the ultimate executive assistant. But instead of just scheduling meetings, you're deciding who gets a meeting and whether they leave it alive. The Chief White. Eunuch Kapia Kosk held similar power in earlier centuries, particularly over the Enderun school and access to the Sultan's private apartments. He could control which young men rose through the ranks, shaping the future elite of the empire. Though his direct political power diminished relative to the chief black eunuch over time, his influence over the Sultan's personal life and immediate court remained substantial. Quirky tidbit: some eunuchs, through their immense wealth and connections, even established their own small armies of personal guards and attendants, further augmenting their power outside the formal palace structure. Historians still argue whether this concentration of power in the hands of eunuchs, rather than the traditional Ottoman elite, was a sign of the empire's decaying institutions, or if it was a clever adaptation to ensure stability during periods of weak sultans. You might visualize a scene: a chief black eunuch, dressed in his finest teal and gold robes, seated casually, almost languidly, while a high-ranking pasha bows deeply before him, seeking a crucial endorsement. The eunuch's expression is unreadable. His power derived not from inherited status or military might, but from his unique position, his unparalleled access, and his mastery of palace intrigue. His life, a lifetime of service and self-sacrifice, culminates in moments like these, where he is, for all intents and purposes, making or breaking careers, subtly shaping the course of a vast empire. Their power was also rooted in their knowledge. Having served in the palace for decades, serving multiple sultans and generations of officials, they possessed an institutional memory that was invaluable. They knew the history of every rivalry, the weaknesses of every family, the precedents. For every decision, this deep understanding of the palace's inner workings, combined with their loyalty to the dynasty, their only lifeline, made their advice and counsel immensely weighty. It's a remarkable testament to how power can manifest in unexpected forms, transforming seemingly powerless individuals into formidable figures who truly were the power behind the throne. Having delved into the remarkable power some eunuchs wielded, let's now turn our attention to a more practical, yet equally critical, aspect of their duties: financial administration. The Ottoman palace, particularly Topkapi, was not just a royal residence. It was an economic powerhouse, requiring meticulous management of vast sums of money, precious goods, and daily expenditures. Imagine the sheer logistics of feeding, clothing, and maintaining thousands of residents, all while funding imperial projects and charitable endowments. This immense financial responsibility often fell squarely on the shoulders of the eunuchs. Chief Black Eunuch Kisler-Akosk, with his control over the harem, was also the de facto treasurer of the harem's considerable wealth. The Valid Sultan, the Sultan's mother, often had her own vast fortune and considerable income from imperial estates and foundations WCFs. It was the chief black eunuch who managed this immense wealth, overseeing its investment, expenditure, and philanthropic distribution. This was a mainstream historical fact. The Kisler-Akosk often managed wooks that supported mosques, schools, and hospitals across the empire, giving him immense influence far beyond the palace walls. It's a bit like being the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar non-profit, but with swords and sultans involved. You can envision him, perhaps in a quiet, richly carpeted office within the harem, surrounded by overflowing chests of gold coins and meticulously bound ledgers. He would meticulously record every incoming revenue and outgoing expense, from the silks purchased for the concubines to the salaries of the thousands of harem servants. His financial acumen was paramount. Any mismanagement could lead to severe consequences. While shrewd handling could significantly increase the harem's and thus his own influence, the white eunuchs, particularly those serving in the inner palace's treasury department, held similar responsibilities for the sultans, personal finances, and the central palace treasury. The Hesena Darbagi chief treasurer, typically a white eunuch, is responsible for managing the vast imperial coffers, controlling the flow of gold and silver that powered the entire empire. They oversaw tax revenues, tribute from vassal states, and expenditures for military campaigns, palace construction, and official salaries. Imagine managing the national budget of a major empire without the aid of computers or even a simple calculator beyond an abacus. Talked about pressure. A quirky tidbit: some eunuchs became so adept at financial management that they engaged in their own private mercantile activities, investing in trade ventures, real estate, and money lending. While sometimes controversial, this demonstrated their shrewdness and entrepreneurial spirit, and it often contributed to their personal wealth. Historians still argue whether the eunuch's deep involvement in palace finances made the system more corrupt, or if it simply provided a stable, consistent hand that prevented more widespread pilfering by less loyal officials. Perhaps it's a bit of both, a system where power and opportunity often led to personal gain, but also provided stability. You might observe a scene where a white eunuch, dressed in practical, unadorned robes, oversees the loading of large sacks of coin onto carts in a secured palace courtyard, ready for distribution to the janissaries, the elite infantry of the Ottoman army. It's expression is focused, his movements precise, ensuring every coin is accounted for. It's the sound of clinking metal, the rustle of ledgers, and the quiet commands would have been the soundtrack. It's too much of their daily lives. Their role in financial administration extended beyond mere accounting. They were often involved in setting prices for goods purchased by the palace, negotiating contracts with merchants, and ensuring the quality of provisions. This required a deep understanding of market dynamics and a keen eye for detail. They were the financial backbone of the palace, ensuring its opulence and smooth operation day in and day out. Their peculiar status meant they were uniquely positioned to handle such sensitive matters, as they had no external family wealth to enrich, only the palaces to manage and protect. Beyond their roles as guardians, administrators, and financial managers, many Ottoman eunuchs also became significant cultural patrons. This aspect of their lives often gets overlooked amidst the more sensational tales of power and intrigue. But it highlights their sophistication, wealth, and profound engagement with the arts and sciences. Imagine being a patron of magnificent mosques, exquisite gardens, or groundbreaking scientific works, shaping the very cultural landscape of an empire. With the considerable wealth and influence that many high-ranking eunuchs, particularly the chief black eunuchs, accumulated, they became significant patrons of architecture. This was a mainstream historical fact. Numerous mosques, fountains, schools, baths, and bridges across the Ottoman Empire were commissioned and funded by eunuchs. These structures often bore their names, serving as enduring monuments to their piety and generosity. For example, the Aga Mosque in Istanbul, built by the chief black eunuch Hachibasiya Aka, is a testament to their architectural legacy. It's a bit like a modern-day philanthropist funding a new wing for a major museum, but with rather more dramatic historical consequences if your building fell down. Their patronage extended far beyond grand construction projects. Many eunuchs were also avid collectors of rare manuscripts, calligraphic works, and exquisite art pieces. They sponsored the copying and illumination of books, ensuring the preservation and dissemination of knowledge. You can imagine a chief black eunuch, dressed in rich indigo robes, poring over a newly commissioned illuminated manuscript, his eyes appreciating the delicate brushstrokes and gilded flourishes, a true connoisseur of the arts. They fostered a vibrant cultural environment within the palace walls. Beyond visual arts and architecture, eunuchs also supported scholars, poets, and musicians. They would invite learned individuals to the palace for discussions, provide stipends for their work, and even establish libraries. A quirky tidbit, some eunuchs themselves were accomplished poets, calligraphers, or musicians, demonstrating not just patronage, but direct participation in the cultural life of the empire. This dedication to learning and art was seen as a mark of refinement and piety, a way to gain favor in this life and the next. Historians still argue whether this cultural patronage was primarily a genuine love for the arts and sciences, or a strategic display of wealth and power to bolster their legitimacy and image within the Ottoman elite. Probably a healthy mix of both, as is often the case with human endeavors. Their role as patrons also extended to the harem itself. They oversaw the education of the concubines and slave girls, many of whom were trained in music, poetry, and various crafts. By ensuring a high level of cultural refinement within the harem, they contributed to the overall sophistication of the imperial court. The eunuchs facilitated the flow of artistic talent and intellectual discourse, making the palace a hub of cultural production and innovation. You might observe a white eunuch, perhaps in a pale saffron robe, overseeing a group of young artists meticulously painting intricate floral designs on ceramic tiles, ensuring the quality and adherence to traditional Ottoman aesthetics. In essence, the eunuchs, despite their often tragic beginnings, rose to become guardians, not just of the palace's physical security, but of its very soul. They invested their wealth, time, and influence in nurturing the intellectual and artistic vibrancy that characterized the peak of Ottoman civilization. Their enduring legacy isn't just in the administrative systems they upheld or the power struggles they navigated, but in the beautiful mosques that still grace the Istanbul skyline, the rare books preserved in archives, and the echoes of poetry that once filled the palace courtyards. Their contribution to Ottoman culture was profound, leaving a quiet but indelible mark on history. You've seen the eunuchs as guardians, as administrators, and even cultural patrons. Now, prepare yourself for the darker, more treacherous side of palace life, intrigue, and betrayal. The Ottoman court, like any center of absolute power, was a viper's nest of ambition, jealousy, and cutthroat competition. Eunuchs, by virtue of their unique access and influence, were often caught in the crosshairs, becoming key players, or sometimes unfortunate victims in the constant struggle for power.
Imagine navigating a world where a polite smile could
Hide a deadly plot, and a whispered word could seal your fate. The harem, in particular, was a hotbed of intrigue. The rivalries between concubines vying for the sultan's favor or between the mothers of potential heirs were fierce. The valid sultan, while powerful, also had to constantly navigate these internal dynamics. Especially the chief, Black Eunuch, were caught in the middle. They were expected to remain neutral, but their positions made them targets for manipulation, bribery, and even assassination attempts. This was a mainstream historical fact. Historical accounts are replete with stories of eunuchs involved in palace coups, poisonings, and power struggles, sometimes on behalf of a specific princess or the valid sultan. It's like a season of your favorite prestige drama, but with real historical consequences and much less satisfying resolutions. White eunuchs, too, were not immune. Their proximity to the sultan meant they could be approached by ambitious viziers, generals, or religious figures seeking to gain influence or discredit rivals. Information, as we discussed, was currency, and eunuchs held a monopoly on much of it. A discreetly passed note, a misinterpreted message, or a subtle lie could bring down entire factions. Imagine the pressure of being offered a vast sum of gold to betray a confidence. Knowing that refusal could mean your own demise, a quirky tidbit that demonstrates the depth of this intrigue. Some eunuchs reportedly used elaborate systems of coded messages or even secret compartments in their robes to convey sensitive information without detection. They were masters of covert communication. Historians still argue whether the constant threat of intrigue and betrayal hardened the eunuchs, making them cynical and self-serving, or if it simply forced them to develop an unparalleled level of political shrewdness and caution. Perhaps it cultivated a certain fatalism. They knew their lives were always on the edge. You might visualize a scene: a chief black eunuch, his face grave, receiving news of a thwarted plot against the sultan, perhaps involving a jealous concubine, and a disgruntled pasha. He then has to decide how to act, whether to immediately inform the sultan, or to gather more intelligence, weighing the risks and rewards of each move. His survival, and the stability of the harem, depends on his strategic cunning. The stakes were incredibly high. Eunuchs who fell out of favor could be dismissed, exiled to distant provinces, or, in the worst cases, executed. Their wealth could be confiscated and their names erased from official records. This constant threat meant they had to be perpetually vigilant, trust very few, and master the art of political maneuvering. They learned to read subtle cues, to understand unspoken alliances, and to anticipate moves long before they happened. It's a game of human chess, played for keeps, where your pieces are people and your moves determine their lives. Their involvement in intrigue was not always voluntary. Often, they were pawns caught between powerful factions, forced to choose sides or face dire consequences. Yet, many managed to thrive in this dangerous environment, becoming incredibly skilled at political survival. They were the silent witnesses. Two history's most dramatic moments within the palace walls, often playing a more significant role than the official histories let on. Their lives were a delicate balance between loyalty and self-preservation, constant tightrope walk above an abyss of betrayal. You've explored the grand narratives of power and intrigue, but now let's ground ourselves in the more intimate, albeit still highly structured, reality of daily life and rituals for the Ottoman palace eunuchs. Beyond the high-stakes politics and the grand duties, these individuals had routines, small comforts, and moments of quiet existence within the vast imperial complex. Imagine living every single day within these walls, your entire world confined. To its courtyards and chambers, their day would often begin before dawn, with the first call to prayer. Like all devout Muslims, many eunuchs would perform their ablutions and prayers, often in small, dedicated prayer rooms within their quarters, or in one of the palace mosques. This spiritual discipline provided a sense of order and purpose amidst their secular duties. You might picture a venerable white eunuch, his face illuminated by the soft glow of a small oil lamp, kneeling in quiet contemplation as the first light touches the sky outside. Breakfast would be a simple affair, followed by the commencement of their myriad duties. For the black eunuchs in the harem, this could mean supervising the morning bath routines of the sultan's concubines, overseeing the preparation of meals, or attending to the valid sultan's personal needs. They would manage the flow of laundry, ensure the cleanliness of the chambers, and discipline recalcitrant servants. It was a constant flurry of activity, managing a population that could number in the hundreds, if not thousands. A quirky tidbit: the eunuchs often had their own dedicated kitchen staff and food preparation areas, separate from the main palace kitchens, ensuring their meals were prepared to their specific dietary needs or preferences. White eunuchs, on the other hand, would be found in the outer palace. Their mornings might involve preparing the sultan's robes for the day, organizing his correspondence, or attending to the treasury. They escorted visitors, delivered messages to the imperial council, and ensured the smooth functioning of the Enderun school. You might see a junior white eunuch diligently sweeping a courtyard, or a senior one discussing the day's agenda with a vizier, their roles practical and precise. Formal rituals were a significant part of their daily lives, attending the sultans public audiences, the divan, participating in religious ceremonies, overseeing the elaborate harem protocols were all meticulously choreographed. This was a mainstream historical fact. Every interaction with the sultan or high-ranking officials was governed by strict etiquette. Eunuchs were masters of these complex customs. It's a bit like living in a constant high-stakes ballet, where every movement and gesture has a specific meaning. Evenings would bring a gradual slowing of pace. After the afternoon prayers and duties, there might be time for personal pursuits. Many eunuchs cultivated hobbies. Some enjoyed music, others studied calligraphy, and still others indulged in intellectual debates. They would gather in their communal quarters, sharing news and companionship, forming bonds that often lasted a lifetime. Remember that patronage system we talked about? This is where that family dynamic would truly manifest with older eunuchs. Mentoring and caring for their younger counterparts, meals would often be taken communally, fostering a sense of camaraderie. The end of the day would see them preparing the palace for the night, ensuring all gates were secured and the harem was safely locked down. You can imagine the quiet, rhythmic sound of keys turning in heavy locks, the soft shuffle of footsteps on stone floors, and the distant calls of night watchmen. Their nights were as vigilant as their days, with eunuchs often on rotational guard duty. Despite the grandeur of their surroundings, their lives were often austere, characterized by strict routine and unwavering dedication. It's a profound thought. These individuals, despite their power, lived lives largely devoid of personal liberty or conventional family, their existence entirely defined by service to the Ottoman machine. You've witnessed the rise of the eunuchs, their daily lives, and their profound impact. But like all institutions, the Ottoman eunuch system eventually faced its decline, culminating in the end of an era. This wasn't a sudden collapse, but a gradual erosion of their power and necessity. It's driven by internal reforms, shifting political landscapes, and evolving societal norms. Imagine an ancient, deeply embedded tradition, slowly, inexorably. The decline of the eunuch system in the Ottoman Empire largely paralleled the broader decline of the empire itself, particularly from the 18th century onwards. Ottoman state began to adopt more westernized forms of governance and administration. The traditional roles of the eunuchs became increasingly anachronistic. The absolute power of the sultan began to wane, and with it, the need for the distinct and isolated figures who served as his direct, unquestioning agents. One of the key factors was the move towards a more centralized bureaucracy, often staffed by formally educated civil servants rather than palace insiders. This was a mainstream historical fact. The Tanzimat reforms of the 19th century aimed to modernize the Ottoman state along European lines, creating new ministries and departments that gradually took over functions previously handled by palace officials, including eunuchs. It's like replacing a highly specialized analog system with a more generalized digital one. The old ways, no matter how efficient they once were, simply couldn't keep up. The influence of the chief black eunuch, which had peaked in earlier centuries, also began to diminish. As the valid sultan's political power waned and the harem became less central to imperial politics, so too did the power of her chief confidant and administrator. The physical and social seclusion of the harem itself started to break down. Slowly but surely, under the pressure of modernization and external influences. Imagine the harem's walls, once impenetrable, now metaphorically crumbling as society outside changed. A quirky tidbit that illustrates this decline. By the late 19th and early 20th centuries, many of the younger eunuchs were no longer acquired through the traditional brutal means. Instead, they were often simply children brought into palace service who, for various reasons, remained unmarried and dedicated their lives to the sultan, effectively fulfilling a similar role without the physical alteration. This marked a significant shift away from the historical core of the institution. Historians still argue whether the abolition of eunuchs was a genuine humanitarian reform or simply a practical consequence of the changing needs of a modernizing state. Perhaps it was a convenient convergence of both moral awakening and practical obsolescence. The final abolition of the eunuch institution came in the early 20th century. With the Young Turk Revolution and the eventual dissolution of the Ottoman Empire after World War I, the Topkapi Palace ceased to be the imperial residence. The Sultanate was abolished in 1922 and the Caliphate in 1924, effectively ending the need for a harem and the eunuchs who served it. The palace became a museum, and the remaining eunuchs were either retired with pensions or allowed to leave and live out their lives elsewhere. You might visualize the last chief black eunuch, an old man in faded formal robes walking through the now empty harem corridors, his steps echoing in the silence, a profound sense of an end to a centuries-old tradition. His once formidable keys, which opened the most secret doors of power, now served no purpose. The end of the eunuch system was not just the end of a particular job. It was the symbolic end of an entire era. A final closing chapter on a peculiar and often unsettling aspect of Ottoman imperial life. Their world, built on unique conditions, could not survive in a radically changed world. The final echoes of the eunuch's presence may have faded from Topkapi Palace, but their legacy and memory continue to resonate through the annals of Ottoman history. They were more than just figures in dusty old books. Were real people whose peculiar lives and indispensable service shaped one of the world's greatest empires. Imagine the ripple effects of their actions, stretching across centuries, influencing architectural marvels, political decisions, and even the very fabric of royal life. One of their most tangible legacies is undoubtedly the architecture they commissioned. As we discussed, many high-ranking eunuchs, particularly the chief black eunuchs, left behind magnificent mosques, fountains, schools, and charitable complexes across Istanbul and beyond. These structures, built with their immense wealth, stand as enduring monuments to their piety, power, and significant contributions to Ottoman urban development. This was a mainstream historical fact. The Ottoman architectural landscape would look very different without the numerous endowments and building projects funded by eunuchs. It's a testament to how even individuals with no family name to carry on found ways to immortalize themselves through public works, beyond bricks and mortar. Their legacy is etched into the very administrative structure of the Ottoman Empire. For centuries, they were central to the functioning of the palace, ensuring its security, managing its finances, and maintaining its intricate social order. They provided a consistent, loyal, and uniquely positioned workforce that bridged the gap between the Sultan's private world and the public machinery of the state. Historians still argue whether their influence stabilized the empire by providing a reliable source of loyal, non-dynastic administrators, or if their excessive power contributed to periods of centralized weakness by creating alternative centers of authority within the palace. It's a classic case of historical cause and effect, where the answer often depends on who you ask and what era they're focusing on. Their role in the harem is perhaps their most enduring, albeit often misunderstood, legacy. They were the ultimate guardians of this forbidden space, their presence ensuring the lineage of the dynasty and the privacy of the royal family. While often portrayed sensationally in Western narratives, their actual work was one of diligent administration, complex social management, and unwavering loyalty. They were the silent witnesses to generations of sultans, empresses, and concubines, their collective memory holding the untold stories of the imperial household. A quirky tidbit: the oral traditions and folklore of Istanbul, even today, sometimes contain whispers and legends about the eunuchs, tales of their immense wealth, their cunning, and sometimes their hidden kindness or cruelty. These stories, passed down through generations, speak to their indelible mark on the popular imagination. Even if they often romanticize or distort the historical reality, their lives also raise profound questions about identity, power, and human resilience. These individuals, often starting from a position of profound physical and social disfigurement, managed to carve out lives of extraordinary influence, dignity, and purpose. They navigated a world that simultaneously marginalized and empowered them, finding ways to thrive despite immense personal sacrifice. Their story is a powerful reminder that history is rarely simple, and that figures who might seem peripheral were often central to the functioning of empires. You imagine yourself standing in a bustling Istanbul street, looking at an ancient mosque, knowing that it was built by the tireless efforts and wealth of a eunuch long ago. Or you picture the vast, quiet courtyards of Topkapi, knowing that for centuries, they were kept safe and running smoothly by the watchful eyes and disciplined routines of these unique individuals. Their legacy is not just in what they did, but in the complex questions they force us to ask about power, control, the surprising paths human beings take to find meaning in extraordinary circumstances. Their memory reminds us that history is filled with unexpected heroes and forgotten figures, each with a crucial role to play. As your journey through the hushed and often strange world of the Ottoman palace, Eunuchs draws to a close. You find yourself back where you started, at the gates of Topkapi, now bathed in the soft, calming glow of the moon. The air is still. The distant city sounds muted, and the weight of centuries of history feels almost palpable. We've explored their peculiar origins, their diverse roles, their immense power, and their eventual quiet fade from the historical stage. Now, it's time to absorb the whispers in the walls. Imagine the countless individual stories held within these stones. The young boys torn from their homes, facing unimaginable trauma, yet rising to heights of influence most could only dream of. The chief black eunuchs, sometimes more powerful than grand viziers, navigating treacherous court politics with a quiet cunning. The scholarly white eunuchs, meticulously managing treasuries and educating princes, their lives a testament to duty and discretion. Each eunuch, black or white, presented a life profoundly shaped by an institution that demanded ultimate sacrifice and offered unparalleled opportunity. As you stand here, you might feel a gentle breeze carrying the faint scent of jasmine from unseen gardens, perhaps a phantom echo of the harem's perfumed chambers. You consider the countless secrets they guarded, the endless intrigues they witnessed, and the quiet dignity with which many carried out their lives. Their existence reminds us that history is rarely black and white, that even in the most seemingly rigid systems, there are layers of complexity, unexpected forms of power, and profound human experiences that defy simple categorization. The whispers in these ancient walls aren't just about sultans and battles. They're about the silent, watchful figures who kept the imperial engine turning. They're about the mundane routines of managing vast households, the meticulous accounting of empires, and the subtle art of influencing decisions from the shadows. They are about loyalty that transcended bloodlines and power that defied conventional gender norms. It's a strangely comforting thought, isn't it? That even in such a grand and distant history, the human element, with all its quirks and contradictions, remains so as you slowly turn from the palace, feeling the quiet hum of history settle. Around you, allow the stories of these curious, complex individuals to drift into your sleep. Let the images of opulent courtyards, guarded corridors, and silent, watchful figures lull you into a restful slumber. Their world was extraordinary, their lives unique, and their legacy, though often overlooked, continues to whisper from the ancient stones of Istanbul. Let those whispers be your lullaby tonight, to sleep well, knowing that even the most boring parts of history can hold the most intriguing secrets.